My guest today
Yes.
comes from the dark side, having lived to write about his experience as a shadow force for good in a country that has turned into hell on earth. Max Kail, which may or may not be his real name, is the author of Zombie Files, Guns, Drugs, Politics, and Voodoo under the mandate of the United Nations, a confession about true events. Not to get too specific, our guest Max was a high school dropout, not anymore though, he has a master's degree, who joined the Army at 17, became a professional special forces soldier, trained not to free hostages, but to take them, and trained in other subversive dark arts that would normally be referred to as terrorism. This is what he says himself in his book. He finally ended up as a security officer with the UN, an organization he thought were the real good guys. He arrived in Port-au-Prince, Haiti in 2005. Is that correct, Max? And quickly lost his illusions about the UN. Ultimately, while in Haiti, he became part of an ad hoc group of security specialists calling themselves the Zombie Hunters Union that went after criminal gangs in Haiti. As Max says, quote, his group operated in the shadows since an evil cabal rules the country with the power of violent gangs and the black magic of voodoo. Ultimately, he says, the Zombie Hunters Union was more effective and successful in combating organized kidnapping gangs than the thousands of blue helmet soldiers deployed with the UN mission called MINUSTA. Why? Because the international peacekeeping forces had to follow the directives of the Haitian government, which was controlled by the cabal. The Zombie Hunters Union didn't have directives because officially they never existed. As I speak to Max today, he's back in Haiti on another mission because Haiti is once again on fire. Riots have been going on for weeks because Haitians are fed up with the deepening fuel shortage, spiraling inflation, lack of safe drinking water, food scarcity, and particularly government corruption. Max, welcome to the show. Are you there?
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks
for having me.
Your book is like some kind of Bosch painting nightmare of a situation. I mean, it's really incredible. So I want you to start with your first impression when you first started working in Haiti, as you went there as a security officer for the UN, right? Could you just talk about some of the things you saw and learned your first few weeks there?
When I arrived in Haiti, at first, I realized that there is no ethnical conflict or religious conflict, which usually provides like a very potential for serious armed conflict in many other countries, based on very deep beliefs and cultural differences. Haiti, I thought it was a problem of criminal gangs, which should be quite easy to be resolved with thousands of blue helmets from the UN. So I arrived and I was convinced I'm going to be part of a successful mission.
Yes.
However, I had to learn it is a bit more complicated like this. And there are certain elements which are very good and genius in influencing and manipulating public opinion and the opinion of the international community. And they are very good at playing this game. And these are the people who actually control this failed state and this dynamic. Because for them it is not a failed state, it's actually a very well working state.
Well, it's a working narco empire or something, right? Or narco-state. Not an empire, but a narco-state.
Yes, and unfortunately, here, even in the moment, when you hear all this news and the protest, the civil unrest, the population, if you look at the core of this protest, it is not representing the population, because actually, I believe, unfortunately, the majority of population accepted at some point or never had the real possibility to actually express their real interest, or have their interest expressed and supported and represented.
Well, I mean,
because even now, yes.
Go ahead. Well,
Yes, go ahead.
well, you're talking about this cabal. You're talking about these people who are geniuses at propaganda and giving certain impressions to the. Who are these people, and why are they doing this? What are they getting out of it?
What they get out of it is control and money. For them, it is a way of earning money. You have different paths. Of course, narco-trafficking and any other illegal trafficking. You have businesses which benefit from the government corruption. They benefit from charging the government 4 times the price of electricity they are producing than they should charge. They are benefiting from, just the imagination of having ports, official ports in the country, which are not controlled by the state, but they are controlled by business corporations without any kind of effective custom control. The state has no idea what is imported and doesn't get the benefit of the benefit of the custom fees and these things.
Well, the business elite in Haiti try very, very hard never to pay any taxes. So and it was very interesting because you mentioned, for example, the Meuse family having that port, having a terminal or a port, I guess, and they working with this major drug trafficker to bring in drugs. Correct?
There was a very significant incident which exposed. I'm not aware of the dimension of such an operation, but there was a sugar boat which arrived, which didn't just have sugar on it. And since this is a common business for the family connected to this incident,
that's the Accra family. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
And
you have to expect that this is not the only one.
Well, you said that one you reported in your book that one shipment of sugar that also had, I think it was 300. How many kilos of cocaine? It had cocaine and heroin in it as well, right? 300 kilos of cocaine and 200. No, it had 800 kilos of cocaine and 300 kilos of heroin, worth $100 million on the street. And in the end,
yes, exactly.
And the Accra brothers, who were running, Marc Antoine and Sébastien, they're called, who were doing this business. They never saw the inside of a jail, did they?
No, at some point they were declared special ambassador. They were given some ambassador title at some point. So
yeah, you said in January.
News.
You said in January 2016, President Michel Martelly appointed Marc-Antoine Accra Goodwill Ambassador of Haiti. And you described later on in the book how you went to a big party, which was for this guy Ketan, who was also a big trafficker who had... did he go to jail? I can't remember if he went to jail, but he came back from the United States, and there was a big party for him. And that's when you realized that Michel Martelly, the president of Haiti, was also very married into and plugged into these narco traffickers.
What I had to learn in Haiti is that there's a wide range of people and associations with the narco trafficking, and this almost, since the country is also very small.
Yes.
It is a very high likelihood that you have some form of association within your family or your surroundings. The problem was that it seemed to have, or to become more and more influential the longer the term of the Martelly presidency went on. It looked like the influence of it became more and more increasing. However, I just want to go back quickly for on the point where you mentioned that paying taxes in general is not very welcomed here, and usually even very wealthy family get away with not paying taxes.
Right.
It is important to look at when a peacekeeping operation of the United Nations comes in very handy if the UN provides thousands of soldiers and policemen with helicopters and everything, which nobody has to maintain by paying tax to the state. So with this, the UN brings a certain stability. Everybody can enjoy their beautiful lives and houses and continue doing the business without having to maintain actually a state which with taxes that they can run their own police force.
As a matter of fact, they don't want to have, they don't want to have a good infrastructure or anything, because then they would have to compete with outsiders, right? I mean, you made an excellent point where you said, as a UN member, Haiti pays less than $10,000 a year in member dues, yet it received a UN military force of 7,000 soldiers, more than 1,000 UN police officers, helicopters, vehicles, civilian staff members, etc. And you said,
Exactly.
and they provided security and foreign aid, which they paid to Haitian businesses to build up infrastructure. And since there was no competition from international companies for building that infrastructure because of the insecurity, they build the infrastructure. It's not maintained. So, and they don't pay taxes to maintain it. So it's a continuous racket where they just keep working on the infrastructure, getting this money, and with no competition,
And now the destruction which is happening again is actually for them the investment they made over the years now not to maintain it. And even now, even the protests, which are unfortunately also actually controlled by these people, in order to create the same perception like it was in 2004 before the UN came in, to recreate the same scenario that this is an uncontrolled environment. There's a big effort of trying the HNP to involve it in human rights violations.
That's the Haiti National, HNP is Haitian National Police. Yes, go ahead. I just wanted...
Yes, yes, the Haitian National Police, which, and they are managing to point at the issue at the police and at the gangs. And nobody ever looks at justice. And as long as justice doesn't work, these people will never be held accountable. And this is what they want. So they are actually now preparing for the next peacekeeping operation, which makes sure that taxes, they don't need. They have a peacekeeping force coming in again and pay them again to rebuild the roads,
Oh my
rebuild the
God.
electricity.
Oh my God. This is a huge racket.
But there is one thing which I believe is positive. And I want to correct, I'm actually not working in Haiti in the moment, but I'm related to it. But
Okay.
I have still very close contact with my friends, and they show me exactly the same picture, in which the same dynamics and the roadblocks are built. The popular movement does not exist because the population does not want to identify themselves with this form of disruption and this form of violence.
Right.
However, there is a positive note, what I'm hearing, that there is some form of awakening within the people, and I believe the internet and the access to internet plays a tremendous role in it, that people understand or start to see the system in place, that actually what was 15 years ago hidden behind some curtain, who are the people paying politicians, or who are the politicians connected with the gangs, that it becomes very obvious and almost public knowledge. And I believe this is one of the key, it's not the solution yet, but it might be one of the factors which could bring positive influences or impulses to this whole conflict. But I'm a very positive person also. So.
Well, I'll say, because I'll tell you what, you describe a line. First of all, you describe this interweaving of the gang leaders who are involved in the drug trade and in kidnapping operations, controlling certain sections of Haiti, of the country, and therefore controlling the elections and deciding who is going to become president, literally deciding who is to become president, because what protection do they need from the president and from the corrupt deputies and parliamentarians? Because you were saying, in Haiti, the parliament is almost completely bought off. And and drug money, that's like huge money for Haitians, huge money. And you talk about how this generation of business people, like the young Meuse and the young Accra and Brant, the big these are people that I grew up in Haiti. And some of these people I knew very well. My parents used to go have cocktails at the Brants. These are the top of Haitian society, and went to school with some of these people. But I do know from personal experience that the Haitian elite is highly, highly reptilian and survivalist. And you were talking about how the next generation, the first generation, like the Meuse father, he worked very, very, very hard. I mean, he wasn't a pillar of ethical, behavior or anything like that. But you're saying, like the sons, they go to fancy schools, they are used to a very fancy life, but they don't want to work hard. So getting into this drug business is a perfect way to keep the money coming in without too much effort. And why not too much effort? Because there's no infrastructure, no judicial system, no nothing to to address this drug trafficking and the kidnapping. I mean, Brant, you've got to tell some of your stories, Max. I mean, first of all, talk about, when did you start your zombie union? When did you start, and what did this union do? Because you guys were not accountable after you left the UN. You stepped out of the UN framework and you and some buddies because you realized that the UN was not doing it. As a matter of fact, in some ways, the UN was involved in its own corruption, which we'll talk about later.
Okay, yeah, exactly. The UN, I believe, has a dynamic, like in many other big organizations, like even within governments and also maybe U.S. governments, where a certain laziness and corruption got in that it made it very ineffective, complicated. And I believe, I hear also that there is an effort to turn it around. But the beginning for me was that when I arrived first in Haiti, it was a little bit of a Wild West and cowboy scenario, which I was not used to within the UN, because usually our approach is, let's call it, soft. And I got into a group of people where suddenly we were more or less told, okay, check what's going on outside. We were going with our MP5s. We were linking up with HMP. We started gathering. And we all were focused on, we had like thousands of military troops, but most of them were focused on a few gang leaders from the slum in Cité Soleil.
Cité Soleil is the biggest slum in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince.
Yes, and it is very important, as you mentioned, elections, because if you control the population, if you have a gang controlling the population, the gang can force the population to go and protest, and they also can force who to vote. So if you have a high populated area of 400,000 people or 300,000 people, it comes in very handy if you want to control the elections or you want to have successful elections. And so these populated areas were like the main focus, and this was for us, this is as I understood it when I came to Port-au-Prince, to Haiti, that this is the problem. Once we remove them, Haiti can move on. So they made us focus for these years on these criminal gangs who live in the one of the worst slums, I guess, in the Western Hemisphere. And at some point, I had to start wondering if this is really the issue. Because actually these gangs couldn't even get access to weapons and ammunition. This comes in with the drug trafficking and weapons trafficking, which is controlled by other people and not these territorial small gangs in these little neighborhoods, isolated from the rest of the world. And so we started working our way through, and we were, not just the UN, we were some UN members, we were other security professionals, and it became a dynamic that we just thought it's the right thing to do, and we were actually allowed to do it. It got a little bit more complicated once we actually, this was the UN effort with the military, when finally there was the UN military had the order to go into Cité Soleil and take over Cité Soleil, which was a quite short event. And this is what made me realize that the issue has to be somewhere else. Besides this, the kidnappings, for example, they didn't stop. Kidnapping continued and continued to be a problem. And the major threat, one of the main reasons why at the time the insecurity and the travel advisories for Haiti were very serious. So we slowly moved into this not territorial gangs, but the gangs involved in kidnappings and involved in drug trafficking and other trafficking. And like this there, we actually started to scratch more and closer to people with power. What I was not completely aware of in the beginning, and I would say I was very lucky that I did not expose myself not too much, because I was not aware of certain threats and how everything is involved.
But the people with power who were the people with power who were buying the guns for the gangs were the business elite, right? Were they not?
Say again?
The people who were buying the guns for the gangs were the business elite. Is that not correct?
Yes, exactly. The gangs are part of drug trafficking many times. It is sometimes you have the guns for ganja, the guns are going to Jamaica. You have guns used in sometimes in payments and used to pay certain gangs, which help you for drug trafficking. But it is provided by drug traffickers who are many times very deeply involved in politics and in the business community. And they have a history of being involved with kidnapping gangs. And many of them come from an older structure back to the days when the kidnapping started and the HMP was created, and under Aristide, the drug trafficking had like a big, it was before my time, but this is what I learned from the people I respected and who worked on things in Haiti for many more years. And I could see the connections, and I started to understand where it's coming from. It's a very complex problem, but it started to be a more or less an official, not official, but it was like a semi-official task when President Mateli became president, and one of his major campaign slogans was to bring security and to improve tourism. And he had a prime minister, Laurent Lamotte, who was advertising especially the tourism in Haiti. And so kidnapping became one of the major crime threats which we had to target. And since one of our men in the shadow we are working with became a public official under Mateli, Reginald Delva, he was appointed as Secretary of State of Public Security, and he was our expert on the kidnapping gangs. We actually first time could really use the information to even use PNH units, or the Haitian National Police units, to target the kidnapping gangs which we identified. And we were very successful with this, thanks to the Haitian National Police. Actually, I was working at the time, and Minusta itself was not very much aware of what I was doing. It was only the Deputy SSG, Kail Alexander, who came from the U.S. justice system, and when he left the UN, he went back to the U.S. justice system. He was very well aware of it and supported us in our efforts. And this was the time when the kidnapping in, I believe, August 2012 went down to zero. And it was a shock for these kidnapping gangs, because they did not know from where the information was coming from, because it was kept in a very small circle, and it was very effective.
Well, you had good Haiti HNP, Haitian National Police, and bad Haitian National Police, because in your book you talk about how one old lady who was, because they were kidnapping people from all levels of society, and one woman who was kidnapped and was freed. She went down to the Haitian National Police to identify, to finger her kidnappers, and the first person she runs into is one of her kidnappers, who's one of the Haitian National Police. And
as I mentioned before, it is a little bit more complicated and complex than
Yes, I understand, but I feel like the driving force of this evil is this interconnection between the elite businesses that are connected to the gangs to protect their interests in making money through the drugs and other illegal activities, okay, and the involvement of the political and justice and law enforcement people through payoffs. Does that kind of sum it up or not? Is that too simplistic?
No, it's not simplistic. This is basically how it works. That the gangs provide the political power because they can facilitate elections. Besides that, gangs can facilitate and resolve other problems and do the increase of insecurity, give them the demonstrations. But the gangs would not exist without the weapons they get from the politician or the political key player or financial backer.
Right.
So
right.
This political key player or businessman has his personal interest of having the next president or senator in charge in order to control, on one hand, law enforcement, to control justice, that nothing happens to them,
right,
and to control government contracts, to control international aid money, to control. It is the last form of legal money here is actually what you can steal from the government. As I said, whatever custom does not declare,
right.
you gain from it, and the state is losing.
Oh, sure.
Whatever electricity you sell them too expensive, you gain from it. The government is losing.
I mean, I remember when my family had a business in Haiti, and we paid customs because my family actually had an honest business, and we one of the things we represented was a line of office furniture. I'll never forget this because this other person, this woman, who started also selling the same office furniture, and she was selling it for much less than we were, and it turns out that she was boinking, stooping, whatever you want to say, somebody in customs, and therefore wasn't paying any customs. So, I mean, these are the things that go on like nobody's business down there, Yes.
Exactly, and the sad part of it, that because even within families who are involved, you have still people who try to do the right thing and want to have the clean caution.
Yes, but it's
the problem is that
go ahead.
It gets less and less because they're not going to survive.
I mean, I have to tell you something. One of the stories, I mean, the anecdotes in your book are just absolutely hair-raising. I mean, people assassinating people, cutting their heads off, and shoving the rest of their bodies in a toilet, and but the one thing that really, going back to Clifford Brandt, I mean, as I say, my parents used to have cocktails with the Brandts. They lived in the same neighborhood we did. And Clifford Brandt, who was the scion of this Brandt family, who had had a kidnapping business, basically. And you talk about him kidnapping this guy Nicolas Moscoso and his sister Coralie, and because these are other elite people, the ransom they were asking was $2.5 million. And you guys somehow you managed to find the two of them, the two Moscoso siblings. They were in some house, blindfolded and in the bathroom. And but Clifford was actually planning on killing them, apparently, because Moscoso in the past had been granted a government contract. So these government contracts you were talking about are highly prized because there's a lot of money involved. Moscoso was granted a government contract for millions of dollars over the Brandt enterprise. And so Clifford, the amount that he was asking for was about the money, about the amount that he felt that his family had lost when they lost that government contract. And in the end, of course, he was going to get back at the Musclusos by killing these two kids. I mean, and meanwhile, like for his business, Brandt, for his kidnapping business, he's using a psychic and a voodoo priestess to help him identify and select victims. It's absolutely crazy. By the way, you must talk about the role of voodoo in all of this for the fear. And you were talking about also how the kidnapping gangs were the most terrifying to the population because, they just created so much terror for just snatching people and, people disappearing. I mean, my sister was dragged out of her car at gunpoint and robbed at one point during this whole madness. But, they were more frightening to people than the drug traffickers were. But talk to us about voodoo. What role does voodoo play in all this?
Okay. To go back to Clifford Brandt, for example, he would she was his girlfriend also, and she had this talent of the spiritual connection from the voodoo side, and she could tell him which days are the right days to do certain things. And if you talk to people in Latin America working drug trafficking there, they will tell you that in Colombia, in Mexico, it is everybody the same things. They would have their shamans telling them what is the right day to do this or that, for example.
Right.
And it is actually was very interesting for me to encounter how deep the voodoo has the influence of voodoo is. I understood very early here that whoever, Protestant or Catholic, nobody would disrespect voodoo, at least, even if they are not actively calling this their religion. Everybody would be afraid of the power of it and would respect it. And as I say, with the Clifford Brandt case, it was even him as a wealthy family, and you would expect growing up with an education a little bit different than the rural or slum areas of Port-au-Prince. Even he was using this voodoo power to his business. And it goes further. I mean, I had an informant myself. He was killed. He was captured by bandits, and he was tortured of, I have to believe, terrible way. They cut him in pieces, and of course we are also interrogating him about the work he did with me and with others.
Oh God!
And I remember I had this phone call at 3:00 in the morning. I was running to my phone, and I looked at the phone and I was like, "Oh my God, Vicky!" And I thought, no, he must be drunk, and because he was very strange the 2 weeks before.
Oh, really?
And so I thought he must have been drinking, so I was like, no, I will not talk to you now. And the next day, I realized that 3:00 must have been the time either before or after they killed him and cut his head off. When I went and started to investigate this, I realized that because I heard from other informants that they were questioning him for telephone numbers, so they called me from his telephone, and they asked him about my work, they asked him where we met, and they tried to follow me afterwards. What I didn't understand was that even though he would have said it from the beginning on, they would have tortured him and killed him at 3:00. And the reason was, this was exactly the time of the new moon. Oh. So the story was that in order to catch him, they used a voodoo spirit to get to him and kill him. And he was the sacrifice the voodoo spirit demands in order that this is successful. So the pain he feels, the fear he feels, the pain it causes to the surrounding also because they did it to an informant. I mean, besides this effect. And to cut off his head exactly at the time of new moon is because the connection with this evil spirit is at this time the best. And it took me a while to understand this until I was going once to the work in the morning, and it was a special full moon. For some reason, I knew that the full moon was some event. It didn't happen for I don't know how many 100 years. And so I was, and I saw the full moon still in the morning going to work, and it was really amazingly reddish and big and beautiful. And I went to the office, and I had a report of a baby stolen from the hospital, a newborn, just the night before, the evening before. And I started looking to it, and I had already in the back of my head, because I learned already working kidnappings that sometimes if victims are not found, or they're found which the head cut off, a hand cut off, that these were actually sacrifices. And I heard these stories for a while, but I couldn't really, I think my rational mind couldn't really grasp it until I had this report of the child, and I was calling the man who made the report, and I just wanted to know if it was his firstborn son. And he confirmed to me it was the firstborn son and everything. And the person told me immediately that this was used during the full moon for some sacrifice. Oh. And there is some form of business going on with. I tried to talk to Voodoo, because not every Voodoo priest is a bad person.
Right. No, there's black and white Voodoo. Right. Right.
Yes. Exactly. It's and the population when they identify one of these witchcraft Voodoo black magic priests, they would kill them. So it's not that they can do this in the open. It's just in the environment of Haiti, people disappear easier than somewhere else, I can imagine. And it is said that these sacrifices are not just done for Haitian people, because it costs a lot of money. I can give you an example of the gang leader in Cité Soleil. It was his mother, I believe. I believe it was his mother who was cursed with a deadly spell and an evil spirit which will kill her. The only way for him to save her life, I hope I'm not mistaken now that I believe it was the mother. The only way for him to save her life, in their belief, was that the Voodoo priest transfers the spirit into an animal, and it kills the animal. It had to kill something. Right. But this Voodoo priest was asking for a few $1,000s. Okay. And this was a Voodoo priest in Cité Soleil for the gang leader. So I wouldn't expect him to overcharge him. So we are talking for other sacrifices or human sacrifices where I don't have numbers, but I can imagine it is a lot of money which is spent on these kind of murders. And as I say, it became a bit scary moment. However, I also found certain spiritual answers or spiritual beliefs in it, which actually made me look at religion and other things in different ways, where I was never a great believer or didn't have much into this kind of thinking. So I think I was too simple-minded. But I realized that once fear gets into you or controls you, the outcome cannot be good. So they talk they talk, and it's not just here. I believe it is linked to many from yin and yang, and many of these more spiritual or older beliefs. It is very much about fear or love, and the importance is, for example, to stay with the love, and the moment fear starts controlling you, it is like the evil is getting stronger.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remembered always these sentences somewhere from the past. Maybe I heard it in church or something like this. Don't be afraid.
Right.
And this is actually, when I was thinking that back, yes, I mean, this is exactly how, with the environment in Haiti, because when you create this fear, like, I can imagine it is now with all these protests again, which I'm sure they are manipulated as usual, but it creates an environment of fear,
Yes.
which makes it very easy to control, and it just, makes it easy for evil intentions to be successful, I believe.
It's so interesting that you talk about that, because I just feel like there's something there. Evil is an energy, and in certain places and situations, it reaches this critical mass where it seems like everybody gets infected. I mean, when you talked about how, what was happening with some of the UN troops, how they were, some of them were, first of all, the Sri Lankan battalion, which did not really interfere in gang clashes or criminal activities because they had an arrangement with the gangs who provided them with young girls and boys as prostitutes. And you talk about this story, you give the story about the Jordanian UN contingent. One day, a boy who was less than 8 years old was banging on the gates of the Jordanian base because he wanted to be paid for a blowjob he'd given to a night watch soldier the night before. I mean, and, UN soldiers having sex with female goats and then killing them and eating them. I mean, it's just like, I have no words, I mean, what is all this evil? Why is it in Haiti? What can be done to lift this black veil off of this country? It's such a beautiful country, really. It was so beautiful. And it's just...
I have to point out that so many of my colleagues, and this is why we did what we did, I mean, even the ones who don't take this kind of risks like we did, they didn't, I mean, they love to work in Haiti because, as you say, it is such a beautiful country.
Yeah, go ahead.
It is the set, as I say, when I look back, because, of course, the UN wants to be cooperating with the host government, otherwise it looks like an occupation. And here, the politicians know very well how to play with this occupation issue that, we are now occupied again, so we were fighting for the freedom. And the intention of the UN was definitely not to occupy it. However, due to the fact that the UN more or less had to support the host government in their effort, in their work, there were certain real problems never addressed. And one of the main problems which was never addressed was the justice system.
Yes.
For years.
But isn't that because it works for all the powerful people involved who are that's the arena from which the establishment of a viable justice system would come, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean,
everybody points the finger at the Haitian National Police, but actually they are, compared to many countries I worked in, they are professional. Yes, there are issues within them, but these issues are many times very much connected with politics and bigger drug traffickers, and does not involve so much the low-level normal PNH officer who risks his life on a daily basis.
Yeah, but you know...
However,
yeah, go ahead.
PNH is arrested. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think you can't even begin to do something like that before you deal with the desperate situation of the population that is starving, that doesn't have even the basics, you know? And I guess, you know, I'm thinking about what's going on now, and you're saying it's the cycle, you know, it's part of the cycle again, which is you have the unrest, things are become a mess, so the UN comes in so that these people, these evil people, can make the money that they make off of, you know, reconstruction, rebuilding, and so on, and it's like this cycle, you know, and how do you break that cycle when there is nobody powerful of good faith? I mean, you can't fight people who will kill you. I mean, cut your head off, come at night and do whatever they can to you, or in the broad daylight even. And how do you handle these people? You know, how do you get these people under control without yourself being an animal? How do you do it?
I have to seriously, I have to say that they actually have a very professional approach compared to many other countries I worked. And I worked with them myself, and they are one of the proudest, bravest people I ever worked with.
Yeah, they are.
Of course, there are issues, but with the leadership, if they have the right leadership.
But there is no leadership. The leadership is involved in drug dealing and kidnapping and you know, not paying taxes and making money off of creating chaos, so the UN will come in and pay them to, you know, to resurrect the country they've destroyed.
And this in the moment seems not to be working, because the U.S. policy in Haiti in the moment is, I believe, very straightforward, that they will not support anymore a peacekeeping mission here. And since we did not change the status quo and the dynamics in the last 15 years, I would very much agree with this, that if the change does not come within, however, of course, it is simply said, but for an example, because what will happen now again is just that the gangs will be the root of all evil. And
Max, we're running out of time, and I want to have you back on as this story continues. Goodbye, all. See you next week.